It's 3 in the morning. The room is dark, the house is quiet, and your body is exhausted. And then, out of absolutely nowhere, your brain hands you a memory from 6 years ago. Something you said at a party that landed wrong. The face someone made. The silence that followed. You cringe so hard you physically move in your bed. And here's what nobody tells you. That is not anxiety. That is not weakness. That is one of the most sophisticated survival systems ever built, running exactly as designed. Most people who experience this assume something is wrong with them. Like, the brain is malfunctioning, looping through old footage for no reason, torturing them with embarrassment that should have expired years ago. That assumption is wrong. And the real explanation changes how you see yourself entirely. Because once you understand what your brain is actually doing at 3 a.m., you stop fighting it. You start working with it. The part that matters most, the part that reframes the whole thing, comes at the end of this. Think about the labels people carry around because of this. Anxious, overthinking, too sensitive, can't let things go, stuck in the past. If you've ever lain awake replaying a conversation that went sideways or wincing at something you said 3 years ago to someone you barely remember, you've probably applied at least one of those labels to yourself. Maybe someone else applied it first. And you believed it because the experience feels so irrational. Why would a healthy mind revisit something that's already over, already harmless, already irrelevant? It feels like a glitch. Like the software is broken. It isn't. You just haven't been told what the software was built to do. What you're experiencing has a name. Researchers call it nocturnal threat rehearsal, and it sits inside a broader system neuroscientists refer to as the default mode network, the brain's internal processing loop that runs most actively when you're not focused on an external task. Think of it like a background program. When you're busy during the day, the foreground tasks keep it suppressed, but the moment you lie down, the foreground goes quiet, and the background wakes up. Matthew Walker, a sleep scientist at UC Berkeley who has spent over 2 decades studying what the brain does while the body rests, found that the sleeping and pre-sleep brain doesn't simply replay memories. It specifically prioritizes memories with emotional charge, especially social ones, especially ones tagged with the feeling of having done something wrong in front of other people. His research revealed that the brain uses the quiet of night to re-examine high-stakes social moments, not because it's being cruel, but because it's trying to extract a lesson before the next encounter. That's the mechanism. But to understand why it exists at all, you have to go back much further than last Tuesday's awkward comment. Truth 1. For most of human history, social rejection was not an emotional inconvenience. It was a death sentence. Your ancestors did not live in cities of millions where you could lose a friend and make 3 new ones by the weekend. They lived in bands of roughly 50 to 150 people, a number the anthropologist Robin Dunbar identified in the 1990s as the ceiling of stable social relationships the human brain can maintain. That was your entire world. Your food came from that group. Your protection came from that group. Your children's survival depended on your standing in that group. If you said something that offended the wrong person, if you violated a social norm, if you were perceived as unreliable or disloyal or strange, you could be cast out. And being cast out on the African savanna alone, without tools or allies or shelter, meant you were dead within days. Social mistakes were not embarrassing. They were existential. The brain that survived long enough to become your brain was the brain that took those mistakes seriously, deadly seriously. Truth 2. Nighttime was when that processing had to happen, because daytime was already spoken for. Your ancestors couldn't afford to sit under a tree and ruminate about the argument they had at the fire last night. Daytime required full sensory attention, scanning for predators, tracking prey, reading the terrain. The luxury of reflection only opened up when the body was still and the external world was temporarily safe. So the brain evolved to use the window of pre-sleep and light sleep to run its social audits, to pull up the interaction that felt risky, to replay it from multiple angles, to rehearse a better response, to encode a rule, don't do that again. The cringe you feel at 3 a.m. is the emotional signal that makes the lessons stick. Without the discomfort, the memory wouldn't consolidate. The wince is the ink. Truth 3. Your amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, roughly almond-shaped, buried deep in the temporal lobe, does not distinguish between a physical threat and a social one. A saber-toothed cat and a disappointed elder triggered the same alarm. Cortisol flooded the system, heart rate elevated, attention narrowed, and in both cases, the appropriate response was to prepare, to rehearse, to not let it happen again. When your amygdala lights up at 3 a.m. over something you said in a meeting, it is not overreacting. It is doing exactly what it was built to do. It just hasn't received the update that says your job will not get you eaten by a leopard. Here's the part that most people miss, and it costs them. When you don't understand this mechanism, you fight it. You shame yourself for being awake. You tell yourself to stop thinking about it. You treat the replay as evidence that you're broken, which adds a second layer of distress on top of the first. And that second layer, the self-judgment about the self-judgment, is the part that actually damages you. The original replay is a survival feature. The shame spiral on top of it is entirely optional. But without this knowledge, almost everyone goes straight into the spiral, night after night, year after year, paying a toll they never understood they were being charged. So, 3 things you can do tonight, not as self-help hacks, but as ways to stop fighting your own ancient software. Step 1. Name the process out loud, even in a whisper. When the memory surfaces, say threat rehearsal, those 2 words activate your prefrontal cortex, the rational, language-based part of the brain, which literally begins to dampen amygdala activity. This is not a metaphor. Neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman at UCLA ran a series of studies showing that labeling an emotional state reduces its intensity measurably. You're not suppressing the memory. You're reclassifying it from threat to process. That shift matters. Step 2. Give the rehearsal a conclusion. The reason the loop replays is that it hasn't been resolved. Your brain is waiting for a decision. What would you do differently? The replay isn't punishment, it's an open question. Answer it. Briefly, plainly, in your head. I'd say it this way instead. I'd pause before responding. I'd leave earlier. Once the brain registers that a lesson has been extracted, the urgency of the loop drops. You've done what the system asked, you can let it rest. Step 3. Reframe the timing itself. 3 a.m. is not an accident. That window, the hour or 2 before and after the deepest sleep cycle, is when memory consolidation is most active. Your brain chose this moment because it considered the memory worth processing. That is a form of care, however uncomfortable it feels. The brain that ran threat rehearsal more diligently was the brain that made fewer fatal social mistakes. You are, in a very literal sense, the descendant of people whose midnight anxiety kept them alive long enough to have children. This is not a poetic flourish. It is your inheritance. The person lying awake at 3 a.m., cringing at something they said years ago, is not weak. They are not stuck. They are not too sensitive. They are running a system so precisely calibrated that it kept an entire lineage of humans alive through tens of thousands of years of genuine social danger. The world changed. The threats changed. The office replaced the savannah. The email thread replaced the council fire. But the software hasn't had time to catch up. You're not malfunctioning. You're just running an older version of the code in a world that was built last Tuesday. The cringe is not evidence against you. It is evidence that your brain considered you worth protecting.